We are live.
Welcome, everybody. My respected friends, on behalf of the Nanaimo Arts Council, I wish to thank you all for joining us. Aitsepka Quansalas Kakip Atanaquail. I would particularly like to acknowledge the Snuneymuxw First Nation on whose traditional territory this event is taking place. We give our highest gratitude and appreciation to the people of Snuneymuxw for allowing us on their territory. Tsiat ala ta Snuneymuxw Mustimuxw ni hachwishes tumtumna atanaquail. We had hoped to have respected Snuneymuxw elder Geraldine Manson tonight to say a few words of welcome to us. Unfortunately, something seems to have gone wrong and she was unable to join us. Ms. Manson is an elder in residence and a traditional knowledge advisor at Vancouver Island University who has given her greeting at several NAC events so far, and we hope to have her at the next one. My name is Sean Gallagher, and I am board president of the Nanaimo Arts Council. Miles Hayes, our communications and operations coordinator, is at the Zoom controls for this presentation. And tonight's exhibition is the second in our Moon Jelly Gallery. The exhibitions in this gallery are conceived by professional and emerging curators, and the curators and artists are paid for their participation. Artists are paid as professionals according to CARFAC guidelines. Our aim is to support and promote local artists, and the three young people featured tonight are all recent graduates from the Fine Arts program at Nanaimo's Vancouver Island University, the Visual Art Department, I should say. The curator for this exhibition, Chai Duncan, is an artist himself, a professor at Vancouver Island University, and currently the curator of VIU's View Gallery. Besides his MFA, BFA, and media arts degrees, he has taught art in universities across the country, shown his own work in a great many solo and group exhibitions, written and presented many essays and lectures, and produced several short films. At the Nanaimo Arts Council, we also had the honor of having him serve on the board of directors, where he made many valuable contributions. Please join me in welcoming Chai Duncan.
Thanks so much, Sean. I would also like to acknowledge that my family and I also live here on the traditional territories of the Snuneymuxw Nation, and would like to offer thanks to the people of the Snuneymuxw community for making us feel welcome here. Aitsepka. I want to thank Sean for inviting me to put this exhibition together for one of NAC's online galleries, and also thank Miles Hayes for facilitating much of our communication and logistics. Thanks, Miles. Of course, I also have to thank Amber, Matthew, and Selena for their incredible hard work and their willingness to work with me and the NAC on this project. When Sean first asked me to curate an online exhibition, I wanted to find works that were responsive to the medium through which they were going to be viewed. So I wanted the work that I selected to have in some way an interactivity that was unique to online viewing. So when I first heard about the work that Amber Morrison Fox was doing for her MFA thesis at the University of Lethbridge, my interest was sparked, to say the least. And then when I saw first the trailer and then the extended walkthrough for Exhibition by Institution, a culture work simulator, it immediately had me captivated. Its game-like format, the informative, earnest, and at times funny progression of events and experiences that the viewer can have interacting within the space, along with its really beautifully rendered visuals programmed and created by collaborator Matthew Fox. It is a great and honest homage to our community art gallery, and I feel it's an important document for our community and we are privileged here to be able to present it tonight. Amber Morrison Fox holds an MFA in art from the University of Lethbridge and a BA in visual art and creative writing from Vancouver Island University. She earned Nanaimo Art Gallery's Student Achievement Award and the VIU Visual Art Major Award of Excellence in 2018. She's the creator and editor of Sad Girl Review, which is a collaborative art magazine project, and her work is available for viewing at ambervisualartist.com. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce to you now, Amber Morrison Fox.
Hi there. Greetings, everybody. I'm just going to screen share. So greetings, Aitsquail. Good evening. As the others have said as well, I just wanted to acknowledge that we're currently on the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Nanaimo First Nation. The land was a large inspiration for this project, and I really must offer my gratitude before I begin today. So along with this statement of gratitude and acknowledgement, I've also made a donation to Nanaimo Aboriginal Center's initiative for the new urban Indigenous school, HISEPCA. I also want to take a moment to thank Nanaimo Arts Council, curator Chai Duncan, artists Matthew and Selena, who I'm showing with, all of the people with us watching today remotely, and the many people that have brought this artwork together and made this vision come to life. So a little bit about me, as Chai was saying, I've lived in Nanaimo since the early 2000s and graduated from VIU with a Bachelor of Arts in Visual Art and Creative Writing in 2018. I recently graduated about 2 months ago from the University of Lethbridge and now hold a Master's in Fine Art. So on screen, you're seeing my longest ongoing project, Sad Girl Review, which is an online art and literary magazine project that showcases girly work, whatever that might mean to me and the contributors when we're putting it together. My most labor-intensive undergraduate project was an installation titled An End and a Beginning, which entailed numbering all of the stairs in the longest staircase on the Vancouver Island University campus in Nanaimo. So that's 370 meters of stairs numbered from bottom to top, all 403. So that's a little bit about my background. To tell you a bit about Exhibition by Institution, the project that I'm showing tonight, I'll start with the circumstances behind it. When I began my MFA at the University of Lethbridge in the fall of 2019, I could not have predicted the circumstances. A sudden move to Alberta for grad school, the COVID pandemic, a sudden move back to Nanaimo, the loss of a dedicated studio space, my mother's cancer diagnosis, and as gaining and losing employment at both Southern Alberta Art Gallery and Nanaimo Art Gallery. All of these events have greatly impacted my personal and artistic activities for the last couple of years now. Artist and writer Hito Styrol described the feeling succinctly when she wrote, "Imagine you are falling, but there is no ground." This is an image of me teaching children in an exhibition in 2017 called Dream Islands at Nanaimo Art Gallery. This is the front page of Nanaimo Art Gallery's website, or it was until August 2021, so very recently. My project, Exhibition by Institution, a culture work simulator, is a love letter to this time and space in my career, and I've really longed to go back to it, but it's not an idealized form of love. I worked at Nanaimo Art Gallery from 2015 to 2020 in various paid and unpaid roles across many short-term gigs and contracts. My longest contracts were for 9 months, and my shortest were for only a few weeks. According to CUPE, Canada's largest union, I'm not alone in my job precarity. Permanent jobs make up a declining share of the overall jobs in the post-secondary workforce. They're being replaced by people working in temporary, involuntary, part-time, and multiple jobs. Those in precarious jobs also tend to be paid considerably less than those in permanent, full-time jobs and have much less in terms of benefits, job security, regular hours. And workers at jobs that are precarious in multiple ways, such as work that's both temporary and part-time, tend to be paid even less. Women and racialized workers are much more likely to be employed in these types of precarious jobs. So I wondered, how could this precarity be articulated and experienced in an artwork? And what was my lived experience of precarity? From here, I'm just going to play the simulator, the artwork in the background while I'm talking, just to kind of give you some visuals. So Exhibition by Institution, a culture work simulator, is a 3D environmental narrative simulator that allows users to assume the role of a precarious entry-level worker. You perform tasks such as cleaning, organizing, teaching, and serving visitors while personal and financial insecurity builds. It's your first day of work at the gallery. There are 8 levels presented in a sequence of daytime and nighttime events, and the whole experience is approximately half an hour in duration. My journals from 2015 to 2020 became the backbone of this artwork. I used my journals for both personal and work-related tasks in tandem, keeping notes on exhibitions, errands, stray thoughts I had at the time. And so these notebooks were incorporated as an instructional, navigational, and at times poetic tool throughout the simulator. Other personal and found objects from this time and place in my life were placed throughout the work too. Drawings that were given to me by child learners became characters. Local foliage and found items became objects and textures to represent our location, and my handwriting even became a font. To realize this project, I worked closely with my collaborator and partner, Matthew Fox, and he'll tell you a bit more in-depth information about this when he speaks. Matthew's knowledge of both video game design and contemporary art was instrumental to the completion of this work. His three-dimensional modeling skills provided the architecture for my ideas and experiences, and we worked together as we always do, conceptually and spatially, in our shared home office. I used Adobe Creative Suite to create images and video, and Google Workspace for writing and project planning. And Matthew used Blender for 3D modeling and Substance by Adobe for textures, among other programs. When Matthew or I couldn't do a task, I met people on the internet and paid them, creating gig work for precarious workers like myself. And I took a flexible work in terms of the outcome of this project. I didn't have rigid ideas in mind of what should be done or how it should look. And I like the contributors to make creative decisions in their own work whenever possible. So the gallery itself is modeled directly after Nanaimo Art Gallery, which is a publicly owned regional art gallery right in the heart of downtown Nanaimo, BC. So to do this, I drew maps of rooms and floor plans, all from memory, and I gestured the sizes of hallways and rooms with my hands and body to Matthew while he worked in the game engine. And we used images from Google Maps and Facebook posts to reference small details to get everything just as we thought it was. We visited the site only once in 2021 near the completion of the project to make sure the whole place felt right. Nanaimo Art Gallery's downtown location, a former bank vault building, was not purpose-built for sharing or storing art. The old bank vaults with their cogs and locking mechanisms are still accessible behind the employees-only doors, and a cash deposit drawer is present in the lobby, though it has long been bolted shut. The wickets where bank tellers used to stand were removed several decades ago, but their presence was still alluded to in the exhibition space by large bulkheads on the ceiling until just a recent renovation in the last couple of years. In this space, contemporary art stands atop the aged infrastructure of economics, which is deeply fascinating to me. The land in the area that the gallery is located on is snaked with mines from resource extraction. Some of these mine shafts lead out under the Salish Sea, following seams of coal until they reach other nearby islands. According to the government of British Columbia, in the 100 years preceding 1953, more than 50 million tons of high volatile A and B bituminous coal were produced from this coal field, and now this coal field is mined out. The land that isn't riddled with mines is claimed from the sea. The downtown area is filled in with slack, which is a type of coal dust. As Nanaimo Art Gallery curator Jesse Birch writes in his book Black Diamond Dust, quote, In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the long inlet that almost separated downtown Nanaimo from Vancouver Island was gradually filled in with black-tinged rock. So the city of Nanaimo is featured in various ways throughout the simulator. Its exploitative colonial roots and ornery labor history provided an ideal place for me to explore my relationship to precarious labor and its effects. So in terms of form, which is a video game, the three-dimensional nature of the video games allowed me to share the space of Nanaimo Art Gallery in high fidelity. So for me, precarity is also experienced at the level of the medium itself, because video games are most often made for a male user or player, which also presupposes a male point of view. So I thought it was important to keep the experience of playing a video game in mind, sometimes giving in to these game-like moments and other times subverting this expectation. Making the player passive when they expect to be active really brings to mind this gendered history of the medium. Additionally, the work draws reference from video games themselves. The first-person perspective is common to shooter games, which implies agency, and I also took cues from Minecraft, which is the world's best-selling video game to date, and Job Simulator, which is one of the first VR games available to home-based consumers. I just want to clarify a few key terms about this as well. So this thesis project inherits much from the video game form, but exhibition by institution is most accurately described as a simulator. So what's a simulator? A simulator places the user into a simplified but dynamic representation of reality as a system. There's no way to win a simulator because it's not really a game in the sense that most video games are. There are no points to gain or opponents to beat, and the primary purpose is to experience a situation or environment. By contrast, video games tend to put the player into a position of conflict or somehow point toward a clear goal that must be achieved. To define the title a little bit, what is an institution? That's a really big word. It would be imprecise to think of the institution as a single building or even a group of buildings. The institution in this context is the art world, which is everybody invested in talking about and showing art in some way. We're the institution right now. So what is a cultural worker? The word worker has class implications. A worker is a person who has to work to pay their bills and to feed themselves. A cultural worker, then, is a person who labors to create culture, and that could take the form of many professions: artist, curator, writer, photographer, editor, and so on. A cultural worker is quite simply someone that works in arts and culture. So to wrap up my little talk here, this artwork, Exhibition by Institution, is a culture work simulator that's a poetic exploration of both space and labor. It depicts the precarity of this line of work and of a lot of work in general at the moment. The labor situation in Canada isn't sink or swim, it's sink or tread water, and it's crucial that we begin to examine our relationship to work, workplaces, and wages. I'm presenting my subjective experience to you with the hope that you will begin to examine your own experiences of work. Thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you listening, and I invite you to download the simulator or watch the videos of it on Nanaimo Art Council's website now until the end of November. Thanks again. That's it.
Thank you, Amber.
No problem.
So folks have submitted a few questions here, and I am going to ask them of you.
Okay.
The first question, I guess someone has looked at your trailers or your extended walkthrough here. You have a quote by Gaston Bachelard from The Poetics of Space on the last page of the notebook of instructions. Can you comment on his work's influence on your project?
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a really big question, but I'll try and pull it down into the smallest form I can. But I'll start with a story. So
Yeah,
when I
We don't see you right now.
Oh no,
Your camera off, perhaps?
is it going?
No,
Still
but it's
not
okay. We
going?
can hear you. That's the main thing.
Okay, I'll try and unplug, plug back
That's a
in.
nice picture of you.
Oh, thank you. Any dice?
No,
Still no? Okay, I'll try one more thing. That?
no.
Oh dear. Okay, well, I could still answer regardless. So that way I keep this moving along. So back in 2018, I do believe, Nanaimo Art Gallery hosted a traveling exhibition from the Vancouver Art Gallery entitled The Poetics of Space after Gaston Bachelard's 1958 book of the same name. And it was all artworks that explored this kind of psychological and physical perception of space. So for me, that book is very intimately linked to Nanaimo Art Gallery because that's where I most often engaged with it until my thesis work again. So within that text, it's really interesting because he talks about the relationship between poetry, imagination, and perception of space. And I wanted to link all of those ideas. And a video game was simply the best form to do that because it allows you to have a different perception of space and a different relation to it. Well, at the same time, kind of you can also play with that, right? It doesn't have to be the space as you experience it or the space as you expect it, and you can have these interesting changes. So between that exhibition and the concepts that Bachelard presents, linking memory and imagination, I thought it was kind of an ideal fit for this work. So the quote at the end, I'm going to paraphrase it poorly for the sake of this, but he basically says, if you could keep track of every door that you've opened in your life, it would tell the story of your whole life. And I can't think of how many times I've touched the Nanaimo Art Gallery building, how many times I've went to work there, how many times I've attended events there, and it became a very special place to me just by simply being in it and living in it. It's, as I mentioned, not a very purpose-built space, but I have a very unique relationship to that space because of that almost, I think. I think that might answer your question, I hope.
Thank you. I love the list of alliterative words on the title page. Does this refer directly to the project or was it created independently and added? And is there a full A to Z list?
Fun fact, yes, there is a full A to Z list. I made myself a collection of art jargon fridge magnets. So that's what that actually was.
Nice.
So we do have those in our mini fridge in our bedroom, and sometimes I string together art word jargon nonsense just for fun. But in the case of this project, in my other parts of art, in the other parts of my artistic practice, I like to do bookmaking, and I kind of hit a wall while we were working on this project, and I just wanted to make a booklet that somehow linked to the experience of being in an exhibition. So of course I wanted to make a sort of pamphlet like we'd always hand out at the Nanaimo Art Gallery with exhibitions. So I took the art related jargon that I had and used it as kind of like a lorem ipsum to create that booklet. So there is actually text on the interior pages as well. It is a real booklet. It's behind me right now.
Perhaps we could post that somewhere.
Oh, totally. I'll send in pictures.
Okay.
But yeah, I was just thinking about the structure of language and how that affects our perception as well. So it's loosely linked, but it's there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Last question here for you. The theme of the game is the precarity of employment, as you talked about in the arts sector. What made you want to explore this topic in a game format specifically?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. I didn't really set out to make a game. It kind of became that way. It initially, Matthew and I only built the first daytime sequence, and we just built that to explore how space is laid out within an exhibition, and it ended up becoming a much larger project. But to speak on how, you know, the importance of precarity and linking that in, it's really hard to gather objective data about the state of precarious work and precarious workers in Canada. Like, we can collect information saying that we have this many part-time workers, but that doesn't really gain a full portrait of the issue. So it's really important that we collect and share subjective experiences of precarity amongst ourselves, because this is part of our national narrative of work at the moment, and that's quite alarming. We're all in this very dodgy situation where we're all depending on contracts and short-term jobs and multiple of these per person. So if we don't talk about this and start to hold hold workplaces accountable and hold our government accountable for these precarious systems, um, we're going to keep being in this situation. We really need to advocate for rights amongst ourselves to not have to keep enduring these systems. So
Well said.
thank you.
Well, thank you, Amber, for answering those questions and for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry my webcam died.
that's okay. We will, maybe that will remedy itself in time. We'll just move along here. As Amber's collaborator on Exhibition by Institution, I got to know some of Matthew Fox's other work that he's engaged with using 3D scanning technologies. And I was very excited by the potential of this technology in a gallery context to view sculptural 3D objects in a virtual space. Viewing and interacting with Matthew scans on Sketchfab, which is the platform that hosts 3D objects as they're very data intensive files. After interacting with Matthew's scans, I was struck by the honesty and the sensitivity that he brings to each of his subjects. He has some way of making the mundane profound in the way that he captures the subtlest of details. And also by what he excludes, because each piece is sort of presented within some sort of visual context. So I was very excited when he agreed to also collaborate with sculptor Selena Barnes on her work that is presented here in this exhibition. Matthew Fox is a digital artist based in Nanaimo, BC. While he trained in traditional painting and sculpture, he has always been drawn to the technical capabilities and potential of computer-based artwork. He earned his diploma in visual art from Vancouver Island University in 2017, and during his time there, he won awards relating to printmaking and sculpture. He has continued to study art and new media, and is currently exploring 3D modeling, digital painting, video game development, and virtual reality. It is with pleasure that I introduce to you now Matthew Fox.
Thank you for your introduction, Chai. Before we start, I'd first like to thank my collaborators from my community, Curator Chai, Duncan, Nanaimo Arts Council Board President Sean Gallagher, artist Selena Barnes, my life partner and artist Amber Morrison Fox, the Nanaimo Art Gallery, the Nanaimo Museum, the Harborfront branch of the library, the various artists we found online, all of whom can be found in the credits section of our game, and to tonight's listeners, since your interest is why these kinds of exhibitions exist in the first place. My name is Matthew J. Fox. I'm an autistic artist from Nanaimo, BC, which is the traditional territory of the Nanaimo Nation. I was trained using traditional media at Vancouver Island University and have since transitioned into creating digital work following my departure from the university. Oh, am I not screen sharing? Sorry. Sorry, everyone. Okay, there we go. Okay. I've always had an interest in self-expression using digital media and video games. I was trained as an artist, but my interests have caused me to teach myself to train myself in the skills that now encompass all my digital work, including photogrammetry and game development. I'm going to play this while I talk. What is photogrammetry? Photogrammetry is a series of mathematical techniques that involves measuring real-world objects and terrain from 2D images. The theoretical basis for photogrammetry is similar to topography, which originated in ancient Greece. The technology of photogrammetry has steadily increased since the invention of flight machines and photography. The term was first coined in 1867. Traditional uses of photogrammetry have consisted of creating measurements based on drawings, maps, and aerial photographs. To give an example, this was the technology used by Google. If you enable 3D view, zoom into a city like Vancouver, you could examine how, despite being 3D, the models in question appear to look more like stretched photos. A more contemporary example would be Microsoft's Flight Simulator, which was released in 2020. Using a cloud-based system, computer-powered techniques can take a series of photos to interpret geometric relations that gather measurements to create 3D maps and models from real-world scenes. Similarly to how a sculptor would pick points of interest to reference a model from. Objects that are photoscanned are often used for industry work, such as architecture, CGI, and interactive experiences. As of now, there are still a myriad of limitations for computer-based photogrammetry, and it is very easy to get faulty models. For example, certain real-life materials are not compatible with photogrammetry software, such as objects that are too smooth, glossy, reflective, translucent, or transparent. Lighting is generally a concern as well, since photogrammetry uses color information for photos to create an image. It is generally best practice to use ambient lighting when capturing an object, which means either waiting for the weather to be overcast or creating ambient lighting indoors. The programs I use for my photogrammetry objects are 3ds Cypher Light to process photos I take, Instant Mesh to help retopologize complicated objects, and a 3D animation application called Blender to clean up meshes. I also use Amber's Sony camera to take photos. Why I use photogrammetry. Similar to the themes of our game, such as the idea of precarity in the workplace, my practice is embodied by the precarity of owning or renting space. In order to create art that is physical, you must first have the space for the art to be present. The lack of space has forced me to forego many of my old art supplies, including all my canvases, easels, paint supplies, clay, a ceramics wheel, and a wedging table. Working with digital media is a choice of practicality, because I can do my work without the burden of owning or storing art material objects. In a sense, it is minimalist art making, and because of that, my view of art making is also tied to the idea of impermanence. I have no problem with creating immaterial works because I have no particular attachment to physical objects or prescribed meanings associated with the cultural legacy of Eurocentrism. And an important part of my artistic process is a sense of locality, or lack thereof. Nanaimo is often a city that has been criticized for its lack of investment in the arts and culture sector. However, I think the lack of an artistic community, or any community for that matter, gives the city a sort of transient charm and is often reflected by the shows Jesse Birch organizes at the Nanaimo Art Gallery, specifically his series of exhibitions that ask the question, what does it mean to live on an island? Instead of finding references within city centers, I instead go out to the parks, the beaches, and the woods to find signs of the city's character. Like artists who used found objects in their practice, I document and present objects I have found in a digital context. Instead of taking objects from their natural context and presenting them in a curated environment, I make artworks that extract the idea of a found object and then present it in a less formal, more publicly accessible format. And the original object remains undisturbed where it was originally found. I received 2 artworks from Selena in late July, one of which was titled Soft Entropy, an old industrial barrel of textile elements emerging from the top. Her other artwork was called Habitual Feminine Pains, and is a hanging soft sculpture composed of large sausage-like cushion, wrapped and knotted together with other mixed fabrics. I was able to successfully capture the first sculpture after a couple tries in a makeshift studio inside my landlord's shed. The final version used 328 photos to create, also indicated by the blue dots on the screenshots. I had to recreate the lid separately in Blender since the object was too thin to photoscan correctly. Selena's second artwork proved to be more difficult to process. I did not have the necessary equipment to make suitable ambient lighting, and the strange geometry of the object proved difficult to capture when hung. It took me about a week to figure what to do until we had our first overcast day in over a month. I rushed over to the hardware store, bought myself some scaffolding, and jerry-rigged a freestanding rack to hang the artwork on. Even with the wind pushing the object, I was still able to get a capture that exceeded my expectations. The final result required 255 photos to complete. That was a project I did on my own. Now I will talk about the project I did with Amber Morrison Fox. To make Exhibition by Institution, I used a game engine called Unreal Engine, which is a proprietary engine created by the company Epic that has been iterated upon since 1998. The program is conventionally used to create video games. However, in the past few years, the company has branched into supporting film, TV, and real estate projects due to its graphical fidelity and real-time rendering capabilities. Epic has published games of their own. A few examples including the Gears of War series, before being acquired by Microsoft, Bulletstorm, and Fortnite. Their games are not what they are best known for, however, as the engine is accessible to both the largest game companies and the smallest indie dev studios, as the game is free to use until licensing. Other publishers that have used the engine have created acclaimed games such as the Mass Effect trilogy, the Borderlands series, and the BioShock series. An example of how the engine is used for TV and film production is Disney's Mandalorian. Instead of using a green screen to create CGI backgrounds in post-production, they instead use an array of large LED screens to project what the engine is showing in real time. Process and game design. Games, or any other interactive medium, uniquely position themselves within a category of their own, as they generally require elements from all visual and auditory artistic fields and sciences, especially math and physics. Arguably, games as an artistic medium is a cumulative expression of human development. They are not simply mediums for escapism. This level of complexity in game design can also have drawbacks, however. Since they incorporate so many elements from so many fields, they can also be very time-consuming and expensive to produce, to the point that few would be willing to spend time creating a game without some monetary compensation. Hence why it is so rare to find games that aren't strictly products. Everything I know about and the engines I use and game design theory comes from the accumulative knowledge shared in online videos and forums, as well as the few game jams I participated in. Game jams are small events that challenge game developers, whether amateur or pro, to create games within a specific time frame, typically ranging from between a month, a couple weeks, 3 days, or even 45 minutes. I've only participated with small teams I found online. My role in the project was not only to create assets for the game, but also putting all the pieces together from other collaborators. Amber and I worked together very closely on this project. Our collaboration was a push and pull between the limitations of my own experience as a game designer and whether or not the ideas Amber had made contextual sense in the game. Generally, the tasks I was asked to do were the following: creating 3D models. For example, the architecture for the Nanaimo Art Gallery building and its interior spaces, as well as exterior buildings on Warford Commercial Street, and objects, whether miscellaneous props or in-game items used by the player. Creating textures for 3D models. Every 3D model needs a texture. A texture is an image added to the surface of the model. Models can use one or multiple texture maps in order to emulate the look of real-life materials. I also created materials using modified images I took of surfaces while Amber and I did our walks around the city, which became more and more pertinent when we began work on the final level. All textures involving text, including a notebook, were done by Amber herself with some guidance. Map design. I created floor plans for all the levels in the game, including the gallery, mine shaft, and the beach scene at the end of the game. This also included implementing subtle post-processing effects and the lighting shown in the interiors and exteriors. Even the projectors in days 1 and 2 were used projected light. Coding. I used Unreal's blueprint system for the coding, which is designed to streamline coding for beginners and reduce time writing lines of code. It's a good system to use when you are just starting to learn basic programming principles, but the limitations were soon felt after I realized that some tasks would have been easier to do under the hood. Despite that, the blueprint system was still an integral tool to use for the small amount of time I had to develop the game. Animations. A few animations are present in the game. Aside from the scene where the floor collapses, the roof slides off, and the end of the game where the boat drifts away from the beach, all of these animations were done in Unreal Engine. The last part of my talk involves collaboration and influences. As stated before, this project was largely a collaboration between Amber and I, and because of that, we helped each other and both had input on the project. Amber and I always collaborated in some shape or form, even in our own independent projects. So working like this was perfectly suitable for us since we both have complementary strengths and weaknesses. While I had no official position in the Nanaimo Art Gallery, I did do some voluntary work for them on a couple of occasions during my time at the university, and subsequently went to work with Amber to help her complete tasks around the gallery. So I got to know some of the staff quite well. I wasn't really an outsider, nor was I an insider, so I guess that kind of makes me a sort of cultural vagabond, which suits my character quite well. I also saw firsthand how precarity as a gig worker affected Amber in the workplace. It was not uncommon to see her come home hours after her shift was scheduled to end, so sometimes I would come to work with Amber to help her finish her tasks on time, since many of her tasks were too time-consuming to be done by one person. Her presence at home was sometimes missed because of this. All textures were made and placed upon models for specific reasons. For example, the walls, floors, and ceilings in the art gallery use a paper texture to refer to it being an academically oriented space. Locality was a consideration during designing the maps. I gathered photos and materials from many Nanaimo area parks and beaches. Most details are directly gathered from local places to keep up with my philosophy of art making and relatively based on real-life locations. Even the layout of the mine shafts are based on an outline of a map that is directly located below the gallery. When escaping the mine shafts, you exit into a serene beach scene, something you would encounter in any other temperate rainforest with its swaying pine trees and jagged rocks. However, you did not really escape. You were on a beach with markers of civilization in front of you. A stranded rowboat that probably can't float, driftwood that came from the lumber mill, and a depiction of a mysterious man carved in stone. all of which are 3D models that were photoscanned. In the end, you departed on the dilapidated rowboat and you sailed back into a society full of precarity. You can now download the game through the Nanaimo Arts Council website. Thanks for listening to my talk about participating in these 2 online exhibits.
Thanks very much, Matt. Wow, that just seems like so much more than I thought. Incredibly involved. Anyway, we have some questions here for you, if you don't mind. The first question refers to the mine shaft. I love the Minecraft pickaxe that we see when we fall into the mine shaft. It is quite a different feel down there from our time spent in the gallery in the way we move and what we see. Can you talk about the decision to use this video game reference?
Art reflects life, and we wouldn't have Minecraft without people who worked in mines. It's also just like a subtle nod to the fact that you're still playing a video game technically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you see it as a video game? I mean, in our conversations, I gathered that it was structured like a video game and built as a video game, but in fact, it was a different kind of experience than a game that has these traditional sort of competitive things and, you know, these different tropes that are usually involved, right?
Yeah, well, as Amber described it before, we would technically call it a simulator, but it still retains its game-like qualities, like,
For sure.
right? Yeah.
I confess, this is my question. So the whole thing of when we're walking through the gallery has a kind of very, almost parts of it anyways, have a very slick, you know, polished 3D feel. And then when we fall down into the mine, it becomes almost pixelated, right? I mean, the aspects, not everything. And I guess I'm gathering what you're saying is that Minecraft wouldn't be possible without people working in mines. So that maybe is my answer.
Yeah, it's sort of a means of acknowledging the labor history of the city, as well as the fact that we're using a game engine to develop the project.
Right. No, I love the whole experience of, you know, falling in there and, you know, the adventure of it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Second question. You have a lot of very cool work in more traditional artistic genres on your website, on your personal website. Do you feel there's an overlap with your computer-based work? And do you have a sense of what direction your work might take next?
I think it's often very understated just how well traditional art skills can transfer into other skill sets. And I think it kind of became a natural fit for me because when I was a kid, I used to do a lot of 3D animation actually. The problem was, though, this was during the early 2000s. And that was when people still kind of had this whole sort of like trader secret mentality. So it was very hard to find good resources online that, you know, can help a kid who is borderline illiterate, right? Because like I said in the beginning, I'm autistic and I couldn't read very well. So even if I did have material that could help me, I wouldn't be able to have used it. But, you know, as my reading comprehension skills have gotten a lot better these past few years, as well as, you know, just just overwhelming amount of resources you can find online now. It allowed me to kind of get into what I was originally passionate about when I was younger.
Right.
And as it turned out, a lot of the skills that I learned from the university and even before that transitioned very smoothly into, say, creating 3D assets and 2D textures and stuff.
Right. So do you see your work then moving more into taking those skills that you developed and acquired at university in sculpture and printmaking and applying them to this sort of new frontier, really, of 3D objects, scanned objects that we can explore in this sort of virtual space?
Yeah, I don't really have a specific trajectory for myself. Right now, I'm still in this sort of phase where I'm just learning the tools. And, the problem currently I'm finding constantly is that I'm actually learning so many tools that I don't necessarily have the time to really work on my own projects. But I feel like I'm kind of getting into that point where it's like, okay, now I can actually start making some good projects. So to answer the second part of your project, I'm not sure. But I'm always working on new projects, so it's only a matter of like what I find most comfortable to work on
Right.
and
Well,
what I enjoy doing the most.
I for one am excited to see where it goes. So thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you. Selena Barnes. I was privileged to have Selena in the very first class that I taught at Vancouver Island University. I think it was 384, which is 2D, 3D mashup. She impressed me with her work ethic, particularly, and her work, of course. But she has this ability to focus with real intensity. That became evident in our studio space, which sometimes could get quite noisy in work periods and chaotic sometimes. And then the work that she created and creates is infused with this lovely vulnerability that in fact communicates what I feel is a great inner strength. While she uses her lived experience to infuse her work with a very active and alive, at times perhaps emotionally wrought sensibility, it's still really important to her to leave the work open to interpretation by each viewer. Selena Barnes is a Canadian visual artist based in Vancouver. She works in multiple media, but she's best known for her organic abstracted fiber sculptures. She also uses watercolor and intaglio etching in her art practice. Selena's work showcases provocative themes surrounding sexuality, mental health, and trauma drawn from her extensive personal experiences. While the imagery is often grotesque in nature, Selena aims to showcase moments of tranquility within the events of voluptuous chaos. She's a recent graduate of the visual art program at Vancouver Island University, and she has exhibited her work in Canada and the US. It's my pleasure to introduce to you now, Selena Barnes. Selena.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. I did have some technical difficulties, so I was wondering if Miles would be able to screen share my slides, if that would be at all.
Absolutely.
I just want to say that it seems to be muted now.
Oh no. All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you. There we go.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Yeah, all right. I would like to thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Chai and the Nanaimo Art Council, and of course, Amber and Matthew for joining us. I want you to remember the last time you felt pain. and I mean physical pain. Think about the last time you fell off a bike, broke a bone, or even just got a really bad cramp. Don't dwell on it too long though, I'm not that much of a sadist. So when you have a pain that's too intense that no recommended dose of over-the-counter medication can fix, we do what we're all taught, we go to the doctor. Because where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So what do you do when the doctor tells you that there's nothing wrong? That sometimes women are just in pain for no reason and to take another Tylenol. Over and over again for years. The same excruciating pain, but they keep assuring you that nothing's wrong. They probably make you feel pretty crazy. Get your own perception and your own memory. For the better half of a decade, I've become acquainted with my body through illness and pain, with only receiving poignant treatment earlier this year. For those of you who are a touch squeamish, you're welcome to mute for like the next 30 seconds. I was diagnosed with 2 genetic disorders, one Lynch syndrome and one Chilaiditi syndrome. Lynch syndrome causes my body to develop cancerous polyps all throughout my intestines, while Chilaiditi is caused by a mutated support ligament in my abdomen, thus twisting my intestines and cutting off blood flow for extended periods of time and forcing my large intestine to flip up and get stuck in between my liver and my diaphragm. Ouch, to say the least. Pain is with us our whole lives, in fleeting moments or in a near constant state. Our pain is delivered to us from only ourselves. Truly, no one can tell us about our own pain because it comes from inside ourselves, from our brain. A broken bone is nothing without our brain telling us, this really hurts. Clearly, in our greatly divided society of STEM versus arts, I chose the arts. But I know that pain is delivered to us via a signal. After an injury, our body goes to work to give us measurement. Our brain needs to make a conclusion. Intensity, location, duration, unpleasantment, and even embarrassment. Our brain interprets these signals along with maybe whatever gory thing we've gotten ourselves into and tells us that this is pain. Something is wrong, something is off, this hurts. Our bodies are analog machines. We aren't made to interpret exact values. Rather, we are made to guesstimate at the world around us. As much as we swear we won't, we'll always make the same mistakes twice, imprecise in our future actions, and free to do so. Change slide, please. Now back to memory. I bet you can't remember the last time you felt pain very well. Sure, you can remember the situation around it, what you were wearing, who you were with, again, how embarrassed you felt, but you can't make your brain process the same response it made in that exact moment. In our current lives, our whole being is remembered by an external force. The digital captures it all, every thought you've had, everything you've wanted, every feeling you felt, except your pain. A video of a guy falling off a ladder captures a moment of pain, but it doesn't capture the feeling. Through my work, I wanted to try and get that feeling, capture the signals, and replicate them for you. Change slide. My process is very intuitive. I gather my desired materials before I have a clear vision. Being surrounded by different fibers and textiles gives me a surge of excitement to create. There's rarely a preliminary drawing, as the process is often more important to me than the final project. Selfish, I know. Being able to sit with oneself and stitch away in any setting, building up muscle memory of the push and pull of the needle and thread, the rhythmic action of it all allows me to sit and ponder on big feelings that are so often attached to my work. Breaking down the recognizable to the un. By being intuitive, my work has an unmistakable organic quality to it, lending itself to how visceral I want the experience to be. Within Habitual Feminine Pains, I experimented with adding a painted portion to my work. By stretching the hosiery, I used dye to create marks that were reminiscent of cells. Rather than using a reference to one cell type in particular, I took the base structures, nucleus, membrane, cytoplasm, and of course the mitochondria, and gave them a mutated quality. Change slide, please. Soft entropy is reminiscent of the desire to create and conceal pain, but ultimately failing and giving way to so that all may see. Plush and graphic mess oozing out, while habitual feminine pains is an act of desperately expressing what you cannot see. Torn, twisted, and very tired. Looking back, when I first started a 3D course, I was rather standoffish of sculpture as a possible vehicle for my art. The shops always seemed so intimidating, so loud, so intensely masculine. It wasn't until I discovered the works of Inger Ogard and Charlie Montrose-Claire that I realized that this was a community of soft sculptures waiting to be discovered, making dynamic, abstract pieces that use traditionally crafty techniques. Techniques that used to not be considered as the same caliber as traditional sculpting. There is an interesting stigma that if something that one's grandmother or even great-grandmother considered an avocation, then it was looked down upon. But 21st century female artists are reclaiming these media by pushing the boundaries. It's also a very accessible media, especially nowadays with the prices of metal and lumber growing so exponentially. This in turn makes it easier to experiment with and not feel bogged down by the pressure of each piece turning out perfect because of the weighty price behind it. Change slide, please. Along this vein, I've come to exploring the process of wool from sheep to thread, raising and caring for the sheep, shearing them, washing them, laying it out to dry, carding, which for those of you who don't know, carding is the act of brushing the wool in the same direction with two very large brushes. The idea is that you will be brushing them in the same direction so that the fibers all line up, and then once you spin it on the spinning wheel, it will then twist the fibers and interlocking them, thus making your yarn. I've also enjoyed dyeing the thread with natural and unnatural dyes, and finally using it within my works. It's slow and it's not for the faint of heart, but it's all part of the analog process that drives me. Change slide. I'm not the best at words, so I sculpt to create a new clumsy language. Vague and always a hair's breadth away from decay and interpretation. The digital has its own language, concrete in its ones and zeros, and permanently capturing everything it touches in its amber. We're obsessed with the digital. We try and surrender everything to it, breaking down our world and turning it into as much binary as possible. It was only a matter of time before the sculpture was absorbed by this amber. It's not the same experience, of course. It's different, more sharp, more angular. If you were here with me with my art, you'd see the softness of the mediums, the plush of the fabric, contested by the rest of the barrel, the rips in the hosiery. But the online experience also lends itself to a closer interaction with a wider reach, a chance for greater play. In a normal setting, there's no way that you could sense what it's like to sit inside the barrel, to lie under the hanging piece. A docent would definitely yell at you if you tried the former. Please enjoy the show, and I hope it lets you reflect on your own personal relationships with your body and have a new perspective to the possibilities of the digital. And of course, remember to play. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Selena. So, a few questions here for you. It was mentioned in the introduction that the imagery in your work may be seen as grotesque, but that you hope that the viewer will find moments of tranquility within that. Could you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Yeah. I find that most people's initial reaction to something that might be considered grotesque, either in its imagery or in the content behind the imagery, your initial reaction is to turn away. Even though if you let yourself sit with the imagery or sit with a piece, in my case, and just sort of absorb it and think about, why do you have such a reaction? Is this actually your reaction, or is this a reaction that you might have developed because of how you're raised or something that's predetermined. And it might be more of a initial reaction as opposed to your own personal feelings. I've also found that sometimes you can get so overwhelmed with something that you can get to a place that's almost meditative. So it's like when you are surrounded by intense amounts of chaos, if you can get to like the eye of the storm and just sit with that, it can lead to some very interesting revelations.
Nice. Yes, I can feel that. Thank you. Your sculptures incorporate a lot of red, white, brown, and black. What purpose do you think these colors serve in your work?
I think they are both utilitarian, and they also date back to the idea of like the four humors. Of course, in this case, white would be substituted for the traditional yellow, but it's all like secretions that come from our body. Black bile, and then white, red, brown. It's very, and they're also very simplistic colors that you can assign different meanings to. They have a great amount of color theory behind each one of them. Also, red is such a beautiful, striking color with brown, white, and black as like a statement. It doesn't become too overpowering, which it can also do on its own. Yeah.
Do you don't use, sorry, do you use those colors exclusively? You don't, because I know you created some.
No. I think recently I have been using them a fair bit, though. After working with quite a few projects where those colors were involved, it's like I've just amassed a great amount of them. So I've continued to work in those colors because I have so much material that just is in that color palette. But I do think after this exhibition, I will be diverging because I have been working with that palette for so long.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Last question. Was there anything that surprised you when you saw the final 3D scans of your work that Matthew created?
Yeah, I was like, obviously there would be areas that that the computer would have to fill in. But I found it so interesting to go into the areas that obviously, as viewing it, let's say in a gallery setting in person, you would never see. Like you can go into the sculpture, and then the program has created its own
interiority.
Yeah, which is interesting. It's something that, because I did not create, I was not expecting to see. It just never occurred to me that would happen. So it made for a very neat experience that I enjoyed.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Selena, for sharing all that. Thank you, Amber and Matthew, for sharing your work and your thoughts. In regard to Selena's work, I just encourage everybody to view the work in the Sketchfab format, the 3D format on our website, and so that you can experience what we're talking about here, moving around her work and moving into some very close proximity to the textures and the forms. So thank you, Sean. Thank you, Miles.
Thank you. Those were wonderful talks and very, very interesting artworks. I encourage everybody to go onto our website and check the show out. It is thanks to you, our community supporters, that we are able to continue to provide interesting and entertaining programming and to support and promote our local artists and cultural producers. We just launched a 50/50 raffle as a fundraising effort. So this is my plug. I want to ask everybody to please purchase a ticket. You can find a link on our website. Thank you to everyone who attended today, and particularly to our artists Amber Morrison Fox, Selena Barnes, and Matthew Fox, and our curator Chai Duncan. Our thanks also go to Miles Hayes at the Zoom controls, and to our board of directors and other volunteers who so generously donate their time to support us. We would also like to express our appreciation to our core funders, the City of Nanaimo, and the BC Arts Council, and to all the other businesses and individuals who donate to support our programming. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and thank you again for supporting and participating in the arts in this region. Good night.